I call the December 4th, 2017 Board of County Commissioners meeting to order in accordance with the Board of County Commissioners Rules of Procedure as amended on February 7th, 2011, in which I, as the county manager, preside over the board's organizational meeting until a chair and vice chair are elected. I would like to ask Commissioner Rushing to provide the invocation and then lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for bringing us all here safely today. Thank you for this beautiful sunshine. Thank you for the wonderful weather we've had. We also pray that you would be with us as we make the decisions for the folks of Union County. In your precious name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I understand that many of you are here this evening to participate in some of our upcoming public hearings. We do have a few business matters we need to take care of first, so I appreciate your patience while we handle those matters before we conduct the public hearings. The next item of business is the election of the chair and vice chair from its members. The chair and vice chair of the board are elected annually for a term of 1 year. The vice chair shall act in the absence or should the chair be unable to carry out his responsibilities. I will open the floor for nominations for chairman for the Board of County Commissioners. Mr. Simpson?
I have had the opportunity to work with Commissioner Jerry Simpson over the last 3 years. I have really enjoyed our discussions. I've found his comments to be thoughtful and concise, and therefore it is my pleasure to nominate him to serve as chairman for the upcoming year.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations from the floor?
Motion nominations be closed.
Thank you. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any of those opposed? Those in favor of Commissioner Jerry Simpson for the office of Chairman of the Board of County Commissioners indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
No opposition. Congratulations, Commissioner Simpson. I will now open the floor for nominations for Vice Chairman of the Board of County Commissioners. Are there any nominations from the floor for the office of Vice Chairman? Commissioner Jerry Simpson?
Thank you, Manager Cotto. There's probably not another member of this board who spends as much time researching the issues and investing his time in the issues concerning Union County and all of the things that affect the citizens here in Union County, and that's Richard Helms. So I'd like to nominate him as vice chair.
Thank you. Is there a motion to close the nominations or any other nominations for, I'm sorry.
Motion to close.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Those in favor of Commissioner Richard Helms for the office of Vice Chair, please indicate it by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. The next item of business is for the newly elected Chair and Vice Chair to take and subscribe the oath of office. If Commissioner Jerry Simpson will proceed to the podium to have the oath of office administered for Chairman of the Board of County Commissioners, and will it be Ms. West who is administering this evening?
I will, with the assistance of some family members.
All right, thank you very much.
Endeavor to support, maintain, and defend the Constitution of law, so help you God.
I will. My granddaughter's face.
If Commissioner Richard Helms will proceed to the podium to have the oath of office administered for Vice Chairman of the Board of County Commissioners. Who will be administering the oath? Ms. West? Okay, thank you.
Place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right hand. You, Richard B. Helms, Sr., solemnly swear that you will support and maintain the Constitution and laws of the United States and the Constitution and laws of North Carolina, not inconsistent therewith, and that you will faithfully discharge the duties of your office as Vice Chair of the Board of Commissioners for the County of Union, so help you God. You, Richard B. Helms, Sr., solemnly and sincerely swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States, that you will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the state of North Carolina, and to the constitutional powers and authorities which are or may be established for the government thereof, and that you will endeavor to support, maintain, and defend the Constitution of said state, not inconsistent with the Constitution of the United States, to the best of your knowledge and ability, so help you God. You, Richard B. Helms, Sr., swear that you will well and truly execute the duties of the office of Vice Chair of the Board of Commissioners for the County of Union according to the best of your skill and ability, according to law, so help you God.
Congratulations to Chairman Jerry Simpson, who's our newly elected chairman, and to Commissioner Richard Helms, who's our newly elected vice chairman. I will now turn the meeting over to Chairman Simpson. Gladly.
Thank you very much. And my thanks to the board for your support. I'm humbled. And Commissioner Helms, I look forward to working with you this year.
I look forward to it as well. Thank you.
I believe our next item on the agenda is the elected officials' bonds.
Sorry, you're looking towards me, aren't you?
Feel free to elaborate. Yes, ma'am.
We are required by North Carolina general statutes to maintain personal bonds on certain office holders, and those are the sheriff and our register of deeds. And that's the item before you this evening.
Okay. Mr. Rushing.
Mr. Chairman, motion to approve the bond amounts for the sheriff at $5,000 and the register of deeds $25,000.
Thank you. We have a motion. Any discussion? Being none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, none. Employee bonds, number 6.
Yes, we are also required in accordance with North Carolina general statutes to maintain bonds on the position of finance director and tax administrator, and that is the action before you this evening.
Have a motion? Commissioner Akmus?
So moved.
So moved. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none. Takes us to employee recognition of Ms. Balcom, our Revenue Division Director.
Yes, if I could have Ms. Mitzi Bockham come forward, please. We're going to put you on the spot for just a minute. Ms. Bockham has recently been promoted to the position of Revenue Division Director, which was previously held by Van Harold, who was promoted to the position of Tax Administrator. Ms. Bockham has been with Union County for 23 years. She is a Union County native, and she's held a supervisory position in Union County for the last 10 years. She is a certified She became certified in 2005 as a deputy tax collector by the North Carolina Tax Collectors Association, and in 2013 she was a graduate of the Union County Leadership Development Program, so she is definitely one of our success stories. So, anything you would like to say to the board?
Thank you. I look forward to continuing to serve you.
Welcome. That takes us to item 8, the Monroe Expressway Road naming public hearings. And it is my understanding that we have to go through these individually by opening and closing the public hearing and hearing any comment that may be desired. So it'll be a little bit of a lengthy process, but we'll get her done. And we have Bjorn. Did you have comments you want to make ahead of time?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a short slideshow that I'd like to go over to give a little bit of background on the overall situation that's being asked of the commission. What's up on your slides and in your packet is the result of about 8 months worth of work between Union County and the municipalities that are listed on the slideshow. The Monroe Expressway will be open by the end of 2018, and 32 new or modified roads were created as a result of the Monroe Expressway. The NCDOT has requested the municipalities in the county to name or rename these roads, and they'll all be owned and maintained by the NCDOT as of right now. We went through an exhaustive public input process for the month of September. We received approximately 100 names. Approximately half of those names were eligible for use, and we used applications for close naming to existing roads within the county. Several of the communities have already adopted names for the roads: Henry Bridge, Indian Trail, and Stallings. Unionville and Monroe are yet to come. Unionville will be in 2 weeks, and Monroe will be in January. There are 19 that are within Union County. 13 are solely within one or more of the municipalities. These roads are listed in your packet. I'm not going to go through them. They're formatted as such so that the municipal jurisdictions are shown in the pink color, and then the unincorporated area is just the aerial. So in this instance, the example would be Stallings Commerce Drive. It's already been approved by Stallings. The portion in the northwest that is within unincorporated Union County would be for your decision. And once both entities have adopted a name for it, it would get communicated to the NCDOT, who would then acknowledge receipt, and then at that point we'd go through our normal addressing 911 name routing process that would allow our sign shop to manufacture and install the names or the signs for the new names, as well as distribute to the post office and other organizations that would use this information. And so we've been pretty exhaustive in trying to collect names that reflect community input, but weren't always successful. Quite a few of the names involve one or more municipalities. In this instance, you have one that was adjacent to Indian Trail, crossed through Stallings, had a portion that was in unincorporated Union County. So the fact that we've had several of the municipalities already approve them is a testament, hopefully, to the thorough input that we've received. So unless you have any questions, that's all I have in the background for this process.
Okay, thank you, sir. Ms. Lynn, I'll look to you to assist with this. Our first is unincorporated portion of SLRT 3 located between Independence Commerce and Stallings Road. The name recommended for said road is Stallings Commerce Drive. So we'll open that public hearing. There is no one signed up to comment, so we will close that public hearing. Our second is the unincorporated portion of SR2 and Union West Boulevard located between Independence Boulevard and the Monroe Expressway. The name recommended for said road is Union Beltway Road. So we will open the public hearing. There is no one signed up, so we will close that public hearing. Item number 3, unincorporated portion of SR3 located between Oscar Robinson Road and Oak Spring Road. The name recommended for said road is Oscar Robinson Road. So we will open that public hearing. We have no one signed up to speak, so we will close that public hearing. Item number 4, unincorporated portion of SR5 and Poplin Road located between Unionville Indian Trail Road and Faith Church Road. The name recommended for said road is Bonterra Village Way. We will open that public hearing. We have no one signed up, so we will close that public hearing. Item number 5, the unincorporated portion of Y203 and Poplin Road located between the proposed Bonterra Village Way and Unionville Indian Trail Road. The name recommended for said road is Poplin Road. We will open the public hearing. No one signed up, so we will close the public hearing. Item number 6, SR8, located between Rocky River Road and the Monroe Expressway. The name recommended for said road is Lacey Page Road. We will open the public hearing. No one has signed up, so we will close the public hearing. Item number 7, unincorporated portion of SR9, located between Willis Long Road and the Monroe Expressway. The name recommended for said road is Blue Jay Road. We will open that public hearing. No one has signed up, so we will close the public hearing. Item number 8, unincorporated portion of Poplin Road located between Secret Shortcut and the Monroe Expressway. The name recommended for said road is Heath Davis Road. We will open the public hearing. No one has signed up to speak, so we will close that public hearing. Item number 9, unincorporated portion of Y206 and Poplin Road located between Roanoke Church Road and the Monroe Expressway. The name recommended for said road is Poplin Road. We will open the public hearing. No one has signed up to speak. We will close that public hearing. Item number 10, SR14, located off Fowler Road near the Monroe Expressway. The name recommended for said road is Grimke Road. We will open that public hearing. No one has signed up to speak. We will close the public hearing. Item 11, unincorporated portion of Maple Hill Road located between Fowler Road and the Monroe Expressway. The name recommended for said road is Balcom Fowler Road. We will open the public hearing. No one to speak. We will close that public hearing. Item number 12, SR17, located between Dees Road and the Monroe Expressway. The name recommended for said road is Kellyfield Drive. We will open that public hearing. No one to speak. We will close the public hearing. Item 13, SRA, located between Morgan Mill Road and the proposed Rebecca Road. The name recommended for said road is George Taylor Road. We will open the public hearing. There's no one to speak. We will close that public hearing. Bear with me. Item 14, unincorporated portion of SRB located between the proposed George Taylor Road and the Monroe Expressway. The name recommended for said road is Rebecca Road. We will open that public hearing. No one is signed up to speak. We will close that public hearing. Item 15, unincorporated portion of Y317 located between Olive Branch Road and the Monroe Expressway. The name recommended for said road is Ellie Rose Drive. Open the public hearing. No one to speak. We will close that public hearing. Item 16, SR 308, located between Austin Cheney Road and the Monroe Expressway. The name recommended for said road is Julia May Baker Road. We will open that public hearing. No one to speak, so we will close that public hearing. Item 17, Old Williams Road, located between Trull Henson Road and the Monroe Expressway. The name recommended for said road is Garden Bridge Lane. We will open that public hearing. No one to speak. We will close that public hearing. Item 18, Pfeiffer Road, located between North Forest Hill School Road and Austin Grove Church Road. The name recommended for said road is Blessed Road. We will open the public hearing, and we have two individuals who would like to speak. The first of those is Sarah Trawick.
I'm Sarah Trainwick. We have a farm there on this road, where this road is. And, it had been in the family since the late thirties. Tom and I had owned it since 1956. And, the Monroe bypass went through the middle of this 100-acre farm. We had to move. We had a lot of rental property that was taken, the poultry houses that were evicted. And, so I know this has been approved for Blessed Road, but I would like to see it, named Trawick Farm Road.
Okay? Thank you very much. Also, Rick Trawick would like to speak.
We had a meeting, everybody discussed that lives on the road what we wanted to do. And we had come up with Blessed Road, which seemed pretty good. But everybody knows Facebook, emails, and text messages can jump up and bite you. And I've gone along with my mom on this. It needs to be Trawick Road. You know, you got people, the road has gone down beside their farm. Very few has it gone right smack down through the middle. You know, everybody that lives there, we're gonna have to change our mailing address on the driver's license, contact everybody that, you know, we get mail from, and get everything changed. You know, if nobody else is here that might talk about it. But, like I said, with Facebook, email, and text, I'd like to see it go to Trawick Road.
Thank you.
Would you like to hear from Bjorn at all on that issue?
Sure. Bjorn, would you like to comment?
The road in question is, when we had gone through the process of identifying all the roads, we knew this was gonna be one of the more contentious ones. Pfeiffer Road, north of Marshville in the eastern end of the Monroe Expressway, was split in half by the Monroe Expressway, caused a jog in the road so that we looked at, well, could it just be left as Pfeiffer? No, it can't, because it has a jog with the expressway in the middle. It'd be too confusing to emergency services. Secondly, looked at east versus west Pfeiffer, and that was disallowed as well because of the jog due to the expressway. It was just too separate. We had really competing names between two families related to long-standing property ownership in the area. I'm not going to say which one is necessarily has more standing than the other, but we had a Trawick name with several iterations of it. Trawick Farm was approved as an option, and then we had a family, the Ivies, who also lived in the area, who had proposed C.J. Ivy, older family member, I believe passed away by now, proposed as a name for the road as well. We weren't at a staff level going to make a decision which one was more justified in being the name for the road, so we had a community meeting in October as a follow-up after the September public input process. I believe about 15 or 16 residents along the road came to the meeting where we went through the options in the situation. We reconfirmed that we couldn't just leave it alone, that it wasn't better to name the other side. Turns out it really wasn't. We were just going to affect the other side. If we chose it, wasn't necessarily better or worse. Which length of Pfeiffer Road was chosen, as well as whether there was some combination of Ivy and Trawick that we could put together as a name for the road, and that wasn't acceptable either. So then we looked at a list of names that would be mutually acceptable, and we went through several names, and of the ones that were proposed, blessed was eligible. So that's what we recommended per the, the statute that guides us. We have to recommend something, but ultimately, this is a completely unincorporated road. It's completely up to the county commission on what they choose. Trawick Farm was proposed as a name. It is an eligible name for use, but at a staff level, we didn't want to choose between sides and say which one was more eligible than the other, so we tried to find one that was mutually agreeable, and at that time, it was Blessed Road.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
There are no others to speak, so we will close that public hearing. And that takes us to item 19, Y316, located between South Forest Hill School Road and the Monroe Expressway. The name recommended for said road is Flint Rock Road. We will open that public hearing, and I see no one has signed up to speak, so we will close the public hearing. And that takes care of our road naming.
Mr. Chairman, the next public hearing is not, it's scheduled at 7:30. It was advertised at 7:30.
Okay. According to our rules, the next public hearing was scheduled for 7:30, so unfortunately, we'll have to delay you for just a few minutes till we get to 7:30, and then we'll open that public hearing. We're officially legal now, so we can start back. Okay, our next item on the agenda is item number 9, conditional rezoning, CZ 2017-005, secure turf.
Yes, Commissioners, before you take any public input, Mr. Matthews, your Growth Management Director, will give you some brief background on this particular item.
Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. You have a rezoning request in front of you tonight. I'm going to go through some information here. Usually our procedure is I give you a sort of a brief synopsis of the request. The applicant or their representative is here. They usually give a little bit of a presentation on what they want to do. Then you open up the public hearing, allow the public to comment and speak, and then I'll come up afterwards and sort of recap the conditions and then answer any questions the board may have. So this is conditional zoning 2017-005, as the manager indicated. This is a parcel of property that is located off of Indian Trail Fairview Road near Ridge Road. It's a fairly large parcel of property, a little over 90 acres. Currently zoned RA40, that's residential agricultural, 40,000 square foot lots for minimum lot size. The request tonight is for conditional rezoning to RA200, that's residential agricultural, 200,000 square foot lots. That means that, of course, at some point in time, if they ever wanted to develop this for residential purposes, they'd have to have a little over 4 acres per lot. That's what 200,000 square feet would equate to. The request is actually to create more of an agribusiness on the property. The property is currently being used for some agricultural purposes now, but the request is really to create an agribusiness there. Just to show you a little information about the site, again, it is undeveloped as we consider it. There are some buildings on the property, but it's mostly used for some type of agricultural use. Current zoning on the property is RA40. That is predominantly what is around the property as well. Some of the environmental site characteristics there are, there's a stream that goes through the property, and there is a utility power line that actually goes through the property as well. This again is some traffic information about the property and fairly low volumes of traffic along both Ridge Road and Indian Trail Fairview Road. Land use plan, or the comprehensive plan for this, actually identifies it within our mixed residential zoning district. Now, I want to clarify that the comprehensive plan is a guide. It's not an ordinance. It doesn't mandate anything. It is really more of a suggestion for how future development can occur. So while it may fall within an area that's labeled mixed residential, It certainly doesn't mean that it's necessarily inconsistent with the comprehensive plan if they're requesting to do something that still meets another component of the comprehensive plan. One of the other components of the comprehensive plan has to do with the preservation of farmland and also promoting agribusiness within the county. That is a component or a goal within the comprehensive plan. So again, while it's labeled or identified for potential mixed residential, another goal within the plan also talks about agricultural in there. So I wanted to clarify that. Here's the site, just sort of to let you know about what exists right now. If I can get this to work here. So you've got, my cursor doesn't seem to be showing up on the screen, but you've got a building there in the middle. It actually is lots of buildings that are up towards the road. They exist, they're already there. They intend on using that for the business operation as well as the other operation. There is a request for a reclamation landfill. Now that does sound, oh gosh, reclamation landfill. Really what this is to establish a place where the business that they want to operate, which is a landscaping business, to dispose of natural materials on site. And that business only would do that. So stumps, dirt, natural materials, what they would actually dispose of in this site, it would be 1 acre or less. And it still would require some permitting from the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. So there's still some permitting requirement. Again, my cursor's not working, but there's a site just below the utility power line, which is where they identified that as far as property goes. This is just looking at the property. Again, it's mostly farmland or vacant land around there. You see, looking to the left of the property up at the top, looking to the right of the property. This is facing, looking into the property, and then that's looking across the street of the property. Just want to go over some of the specifics about it as far as the conditions go. The request is to have, again, as I said, a reclamation landfill on the site for 1 acre or less. Employee dispatch, storage and maintenance of business equipment, office space, and mulch processing, all as part of the agribusiness, which is the landscaping business that will be located there. And there's also a residence on the property, and that would continue to stay as well. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have at this time. I know the applicant is here, and they may have a presentation they'd like to give. I'm going to minimize this.
Any questions at this time from the board? Mr. Helms?
Yep. On your original map, it looked like you may be including a section across the street.
Unfortunately, with tax records, that appears to be incorporated with it, but that is not the request. The request is only the 90 acres, which is actually on the side where we show all the sites. So for tax records, it shows they're connected, but it's what we consider the parcel that has the house and the reclamation landfill to be the one that's rezoned.
About how much, you said there's 90 acres, but there's power line going through, and what your last map kind of showed most of it in front of the power line.
That's correct, yes,
correct?
sir. And those are existing buildings that are already there in front of the power line. The landfill is proposed behind the power line. That's the only part of the business that I know of that is on the back side of the power line. Everything else is on the front side of the power line.
Okay.
Mr. Rushing?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The landfill, is that going to be the mulching? I mean, they're going to mulch the stumps and the things there? Or
It is my understanding that that's what they intend to do. Again, I would like
So
to
it's not burying it.
answer that directly, but that's my understanding, yes, sir. I know there's an aerial here. I want to pull that up just so you can see. Again, it's a larger piece here. That's Lawyers Road here. Again, Indian Trail, Fairview, and that's Ridge Road. So you can just get a bigger view of where the property is. It's sort of surrounded by other municipal areas. You've got Stallings out here. You've got some Indian Trail, Fairview. So a lot of municipalities that sort of surround this area. Any other questions I can answer for the board at this time?
Okay, thank you, Brian.
Thank you, sir.
We will open the public hearing officially, so come right on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Board. My name is Travis Green. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Secure Turf, and I wanted to go ahead and pull this up just so you can see it a little more clearly. This is the site plan that Brian was showing you a few moments ago. And so just to recap a few things that Mr. Matthews was kind enough to go over for me. We are doing a term down zoning. We are going from RA 40 to RA 200. So that obviously makes it so that further development in the future would be much less populated. And my client is going to continue to reside on this property, so one of the uses in addition to the other aspects to operate his business is going to be residential, as he does lives right here on this map. So what he's requesting to do in addition to down zoning, he's going to add the reclamation of landfill, which I'm sure I'll go into more detail in just a moment, employee dispatch, office space. Right now he has about 6 to 8 employees that actually operate there in the office. And then we've got mulch processing, which that's part of his business as well that I'll get more into. So my client, Secure Turf, he operates a landscaping business. He does everything from cutting grass to putting out mulch to trimming leaves and hedges, etc. I mean, everyone's pretty familiar with what a landscaping business does. And as part of that, obviously, he winds up with some natural material, limbs, hedge clippings, etc. And that is actually the purpose of the reclamation landfill that he intends. If you guys can see my cursor, it's this square down here. And if you can see these lines here, this is the floodplain. So you can see that the proposed location is going to be out of that floodplain, just on the other side of the utility lines there. The purpose of this is, like I said, so that he can bring his natural material. So this isn't garbage. This isn't household waste. This is limbs and stumps and things like that. It's less than 1 acre, and this was actually a learning experience for me. I learned that everyone in this RA 40 or RA 200 can, by right, operate a less than 1 acre reclamation landfill for up to 2 years without having to do any type of rezoning. My client would like to be able to keep this open because he's using it for his business. This isn't like he's going to be doing a major development and bring a lot of material to this location and dump it. He's going to be using it over time. Obviously, less than 1 acre, we're not talking about a ton of material at one time. There's also the state requirements that Mr. Matthews brought up. By you accepting or approving this reclamation landfill as part of the rezoning, he's still going to have his state requirements. He's not going to be able to just immediately go into this. So there is going to be that state regulation that is required. I know I've gone over time here. I believe I hit most of my points. I don't know if you guys have any questions that I can answer for you about his business. I've got my client here in case there's more specific.
Commissioner Rushing has a question for you, I believe.
Yeah, the lamp, is that sufficient area? I mean, do you need more, or is that all you can use, or
That's all that we anticipate using at this time.
are you gonna mulch it, or are you gonna,
There may be, we don't have any mulching equipment at this time. It may be something that we mulch in the future. But again, it's just we're bringing back materials that we collect from our customers, from our clients. We'll mulch it on site. If it's usable, we'll spread it over fields that are on the property for agriculture. If we can reuse it as soil or organics, we'll do so. Again, it's just to try to renewable, reusable type stuff.
and like I said, we've just been in landscaping and working that, and we had 4 acre tract, and it seemed like it filled up quicker, especially when you get busy. I just didn't know if you needed more, if we needed to do that now, or do something if you were gonna be mulching it.
At this point, we don't anticipate it being a whole lot bigger.
Well, hopefully you get busy, right? Hopefully you're real busy.
Right. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any further? Thank you. Okay, we have no one else signed up to speak. So at this time, we'll close the public hearing and hear again from Brian.
Thank you, sir. So just to recap, there are some conditions that the board would need to consider before you make any decisions. Just so you're aware, planning board did meet in November. They did recommend unanimously to approve this request. The staff has also recommended approval of this. As I pointed out earlier, even though there are some competing interests within the comp plan, we do feel that one of the components of the comp plan, as far as preserving farmland and promoting agribusiness, certainly does meet the comp plan. So we recommend that this does meet the comp plan for that matter, and staff would recommend approval of this. Conditions to be considered are as follows. Number one, the permitted uses are residential, as well as the reclamation landfill of 1 acre or less, agribusiness, which would be employee dispatch, storage and maintenance of business equipment, the office space, and mulch processing. The applicant is requesting vested rights for a period of 5 years. They can make that request. That's one of their conditions of this as well. This is a conditional rezoning, so a site plan and conceptual plan and conditions can apply as far as the approval goes. So again, this site plan and the conditions would be part of the approval of this project. And they intend on meeting all other regulations within the UDO, which is natural anyway, they will. So those are the conditions for the project. Again, staff would recommend approval of this, and I will answer any questions you might have.
Further questions? Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, sir.
Next item is item 10, conditional rezoning CZ 2017-007 Truffle Plaza.
All right, hear from me again. All right, so tonight, again, you have a conditional rezoning request here for a piece of property located on Highway 16. This is near Newtown Road. Property is, the request is CZ 2017-007. It is a conditional rezoning request. Property is actually located, again, just off of, near the intersection of Newtown Road and Highway 16 or Providence Road. You see the site there, it's located. It's surrounded by both residential uses and commercial uses within the area. There's recently been some rezoning activity within that area, and I'll go over that in just a few minutes. Currently, the property is zoned RA40, and around it is zoned RA40, but as you can see at the intersection, there is some commercial zoning. There's another piece that doesn't show up on here that is commercially zoned. I'll show that in just a moment. Traffic in the area, again, there are some proposed widenings for Highway 16 for 2023, and that is a multi-lane or a 4-lane project. What that is intended to be at this point in time. Then Newtown Road has some improvements at some point in the future for a 3-lane cross section. You can see there's a significant amount of traffic there on Highway 16. There are no environmental site constraints that we're aware of for this particular piece of property. The comp plan does actually show this area within the what's called a neighborhood center. That circle is what's defined as a neighborhood center. As I stated previously, the comp plan is not an ordinance, it is a guide. That circle is generally about 1/4 of a mile in diameter. 1/4 of a mile comes from what is considered to be reasonably walkable. Planning information usually says anything from 1/4 mile to a 1/2 mile is considered walkable. So that is a 1/4 mile radius. It doesn't mean it has to be a 1/4 mile. It could certainly shrink, or it could be larger, but that's what was chosen when the plan was done, it's a 1/4 mile radius. It does fall within that current area. For neighborhood center, basically there's a mix of uses. It talks about retail, but it also talks about restaurants and service type uses, commercial services. Those include office and service type businesses. This is a site plan here for the property. As you can see, it doesn't give you an actual location of building and parking. This is a little more of a hybrid request. Rather than show building and parking, they're really requesting uses and then showing what they'll meet as far as the buffer goes around the property, and then ultimately the size of the building and the parking, if approved, would be dictated by the size of the buildings. If you have a large building, the parking spaces are going to be a certain number of parking spaces. That's what they'll fit within the site. So this is not where they're actually showing you a site plan. Our ordinance allows that kind of request where they can show you a general plan and ask for uses specifically. This is, again, showing you at the top, looking left from the property, looking right from the property, looking at the property, and then looking across the street from the property. And I want to go back to the map here. So, not sure why my screen's not showing on here for some reason. All right, there we go. So the property's actually here. There was recently a rezoning on this parcel here. This was the old fire station, just to kind of give you an idea. This is the old fire station. This was recently rezoned for commercial use. There is, coming to this board at some point in time, another rezoning request for a parcel here. And this parcel here has also been submitted for a rezoning request. So I just wanted to give you some area so that you can see a much wider area of what is going on. You've got commercial in this location here, commercial in this location here. This is the Village of Marvin's jurisdiction. I believe they have a project that has been approved by the Village of Marvin. It's not under construction, but I believe that has been approved at this time. And I think the applicant is here, and I will be happy to answer any questions, but if not, I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Mr. Rushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see in here the animal services, including grooming, training, supplies, and veterinary. Would that include like a kennel or keeping animals on site
It
for
certainly
veterinary?
could, yes, sir. It certainly could.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, sir.
So we will open the public hearing. Mr. Lee.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I'm James Allen Lee. I'm here on behalf of the owner of the property who requested this rezoning. And I will be quick and brief to address your point. It does not, there could be some boarding would be ancillary to the animal hospital. It could not be just a commercial boarding facility. That has a separate classification under the UDO, which would require different zoning. But there would be, if this was approved as requested, it would be available as an accessory use to a veterinary hospital. As Brian pointed out and has mentioned several times about the future land use plans, that were adopted, and he showed you the map here where this is within the neighborhood center. And I just wanted to address a little bit about the rezoning process and what takes place, and what motivated my client to attempt to rezone the property in this manner. First, the county does not prospectively go out and rezone property. You'll go out and grab an area and say, okay, we're making all this commercial, we're making this office, and you owners that are there, you do it, y'all adopt a plan, which you've done in this instance. And then it's incumbent upon the owners of that property or applicants, developers that are coming in to utilize property to come in and request that rezoning. And that's what we're doing here. And I will tell you, my client grew up in this house. She got it from her parents. She's lived there, and she's not anti-development. She did not own the property that's Chatsworth, but just to the north of it, next to the development, she had 25 acres she sold to the developer in 2003, where there's a housing development there now. You know, she understands this, the character of this area has changed, as it's been shown by the land use plan here and what's going on. I was here before y'all doing a rezoning just down off of Newtown Road a couple of years ago that was approved, and now there's a storage facility going in there. The character of this area has drastically changed. You know, at each instance, you know, we've had opposition from the neighborhood, and that's understandable. I understand and I sympathize with people who live out there. Traffic is one of the major things that gets hit. I believe the count was something 20,000 cars a day going by there. You know, that's why this area is up for, you know, widening the road. That's why commercial development wants to go. You know, all the rooftops come in, this is what follows. And I submit to you that it's important for Union County to put commercial development and office development within our county. Otherwise, they're gonna drive down to Waverly and put them up there. They're gonna go over to Indian Land. They're gonna go to Blakeney. All these places they've already built right around, and all the commercial tax base leaves our county and goes to the surrounding counties and supports them. You know, I will also say the motivation of my client was to be as accommodating as possible to the adjoining landowners. We didn't want retail here. It would not be a good spot for retail, in my opinion, with the road. The highway widening's gonna come. Those other commercial spots beside it, most of those lots are gonna get eat up in that highway widening. And we've also made, and I'll be very, very brief, we've made a couple of changes to the plan. There were never really any suggestions from the opposition, from the neighborhood there, Chatsworth, for changes to the plan, but we have, essentially they just don't want it, they want it to stay R40. But what we have done is we have limited the height. There is a new plan that was sent to Lee earlier this week. What it says is 2 stories for the building, or a maximum of 40 feet. That's a 10-foot restriction off of what would be allowable in office. And we also put a requirement. One thing that was mentioned at the planning board was lights. There are 2 ways, and your ordinance addresses light. It can be half a foot candle at the property line on residential. There are 2 ways to determine that. We have agreed during the design phase to do a photometric study, which is essentially the designers go put the specific lights that are there, and there's studies that say what angle, where the light falls, to make sure that that is met. And our understanding from staff is that that is the best way to assure that is done. With directional lighting and stuff, they can do that. The buffers that are there, there's a 10-foot buffer around this that is undisturbed, other than what has to be done to get sewer or stormwater drainage off-site, but it has to be put back to S2, which is, again, in the ordinance, and we would have to replant anything that goes, but there's a 10-foot buffer all the way around where you disturb nothing other than where the utilities require it to be done. With that, if you have any questions for me, Wanda Fuller, who is the engineer on this, is also here. She signed up, but she's really here, available for questions if you have those. Thank you, and I'd ask you to approve this conditional rezone.
Questions for James Allen? Okay, thank you. We have several signed up to speak. And we would ask you, if you could, to try and limit your comments to 3 minutes. First speaker will be Curtis Blackwood. I'm sorry, go, yeah, you come right ahead. You come right ahead and make comments. Then Curtis, you're next.
Good evening. My name is Melanie Cox. I'm an attorney. I have an office in Waxhaw, and I'm here representing the Homeowners Association of Chatsworth. And I have a brief PowerPoint, and I believe there's several homeowners that are going to waive their 3 minutes, so I have a few extra minutes if that's okay with you.
Sure, fine.
One of the frustrations with this conditional rezoning as opposed to the previous one is there are so many various types of uses that could be placed on this building. On their application, they asked for a commercial use category, which could include any type of business service, renting of merchandise to the general public, a use which could include executive offices, management offices, administrative offices, medical services, professional improvement services they placed on their application. That could be a fitness and health club, a nail salon, a day spa, yoga studio, martial arts studio. They also asked for permission to have a studio, instructional, or service, which includes drama, dance, fine arts, photography studios. Daycare center, under your ordinance, daycare center is any center that keeps kids more than 2 but less than 24 hours a day. So potentially this could be a daycare center that could be open 23 hours a day. They have those daycare centers for parents that work during the night and need those services at nighttime. Animal services, pretty self-explanatory with grooming, supplies, and veterinarian. Our concerns with this rezoning from residential to office use is our contention is it does not comply with the Union County Comprehensive Plan, that this is located in a heavily residential thoroughfare. It adjoins the Chatsworth subdivision. It backs up to 4 properties and is within the direct sight line of 9 lots within the community. Now, while Mr. Matthews and Mr. Lee pointed out that yes, there is commercial and retail within the intersection of Providence and Newtown, every one of those businesses you can access by Providence Road or Newtown Road. So there's multiple ways to enter and exit those businesses. The problem with this is you've got 2-lane Providence Road. If someone's coming from Charlotte towards this area and wants to make a left, they could be there 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 minutes before they're able to. While that parcel that's 2 parcels away from it that was recently rezoned that Mr. Matthews talked to, our understanding is that was conditional zoning and it's limited to just a digital print shop. I wasn't here for any of that, but I was told that the applicant said he doesn't have a lot of customer traffic. He just needs it to, that office space to run his print shop so there's not cars going in and out causing additional traffic on Providence Road. Of the potential business uses, they all vary greatly in terms of noise, traffic, lighting, hours of operation. The current site, and this is our biggest concern, is only 1.54 acres. Our understanding is once Providence Road is widened, the site is only going to be a little over 1 acre. And that because of that, DOT is going to make them go right in and right out of the parcel, which means everyone's going to be using Chatsworth or Victoria Lake right above it as a turnaround. So now their entrance of their community is a turnaround because those people using that business aren't going to be able to make a left out of the parcel to head towards Waxhaw. Mr. Lee pointed out we need to keep businesses in Union County, but there is plenty of office space and business space in Union County. These business owners don't have to go to Waverly or Ballantyne. There's space behind Snap Fitness in Waxhaw. There's a lot of office space. There's office space at 84 in Weddington. There's ample office space in the community that there isn't a great need for this. Skipped a picture if I move back. Here is a picture that was taken with a drone, and I have individual copies for each of you if you'd like one. The red in the square is where the current parcel sits. You can see the house corner on the right corner. And then you can see the various houses that are in Chatsworth subdivision adjoining it with 2 lots that have not yet been built on. This is controlled under the statute 158 341. I'm sure you guys are very familiar with this, but as you know, zoning regulations have to be made in accordance with a comprehensive plan. And before adopting or rejecting a zoning amendment, you all need to adopt a statement to describe whether the action is consistent with a comprehensive plan and explain why you believe it's to be reasonable and in the public interest. It's our contention that the only one who would benefit from this rezoning is the property owner, that the rezoning decisions on a small parcel that do not consider the effects of rezoning within the larger community as a whole violate the statute, and that Union County's future land use plan depicts the community's vision for a development pattern that balances the economic, social, environmental needs of Union County, strengthens the local economy, and preserves the high quality of life for all residents. And all of the residents of Chatsworth are very concerned with their property values and their quality of life. It's hard to see the future land use concept. This was used in the planning board presentation by Lee Jensen, and I believe. But it talks about neighborhood centers, which Mr. Matthews touched on. They're in areas with access to major thoroughfares and utilities. We're not in competition with existing centers, but it talks about grocery stores, retail establishments, restaurants, and services. And one of the reasons we feel that this does not fit into the definition is typical neighborhood centers range from 30,000 square feet to 125,000 square feet of retail space. We've been told this might be 2,500 square feet building. I mean, the parcel's only gonna be an acre. Also, neighborhood centers have a well-connected pedestrian and bicycle network where, if you're at all familiar with the intersection of Providence and Newtown Road, there is no well-connected pedestrian or bicycle center network that those in the surrounding communities would be able to walk or use whatever type business might be located there. Our biggest concern is that this rezoning, this one small parcel, would constitute illegal spot zoning. Spot zoning in North Carolina is given stricter judicial scrutiny. You must have a reasonable basis to justify spot zoning. What spot zoning is, according to the Supreme Court case Blades versus City of Raleigh in 1972, is a restriction upon an owner's right to use a specific tract for a use profitable to him but detrimental to the value of other properties in the area, thus promoting the most appropriate use of land throughout. There's 4 factors the courts have given us as a guide to determine whether or not this rezoning or any rezoning could constitute illegal spot zoning. Those are found in the Chisholm versus Guilford County case from 1988. First one is the size of the tract. The smaller the tract, the more likely the rezoning will be held invalid. This is 1 acre. I've read cases 11 acres, 60 acres where it's held invalid. I believe the homeowners have a very strong case that a parcel just over 1 acre that's surrounded by residential could be considered illegal spot zoning. It's compatibility with the existing comprehensive zoning plan, and it's our contention it does not comply. The third factor is to balance the benefits and detriments. We contend that it helps just the property owner, and who is harmed is the surrounding neighbors and the community as a whole. The courts talk about it's not just those people whose property might back up to it or those in a subdivision next to it, but you look at the entire community as a whole, Weddington, Marvin, anyone in that area. And then the fourth factor is the relationship between the proposed use and current uses of adjacent properties. The greater the disparity, the more likely it would be found to be illegal spot zoning, and all of the surrounding parcels in that area are R40. There's been some talk about that big section that in some maps of Marvin you see yellow and it says commercial. I talked to Mary Scoot, who is the Village of Marvin Administrator Planner, and I've also, because I represent Marvin, very aware of this project, and that is not designated commercial zoning. It is, Marvin doesn't have a commercial factor, so what they did was individual conditional district, and this is an email from Ms. Scoot, that the zoning classification allows for a very customized development, and what was actually approved is a mixed-use development project. The ICD requires a whole district development and design standards manual be written specifically for the proposal, which are the conditions, and those conditions I think are about 60 pages long. And this is another overhead shot of the property and the parcel, and you can see the homes in Chatsworth and the house that abuts Providence Road. And we're here to respectfully request that you deny the rezoning. Our contention is it does not comply with the existing land use plan. It is not reasonable and in the public interest. It would negatively impact adjoining properties. The adjoining properties are all zoned R40, and we believe this should stay R40. And we feel that the courts would invalidate this rezoning as a legal spot zoning. Thank you.
Blackwood. Three minutes, if you will.
Good evening. I don't envy you getting to sit in those chairs tonight. I'm Curtis Blackwood. I live at 1401 Hawkstone Drive, and I'm here to ask you to deny the zoning. I was amazed they'd already put it up for sale as commercial, because I thought y'all had input on that. I have two or three things that I'd like to bring up. I came to the county in the early 40s, and that was the early 40s, gosh, getting senior moment here, in the early 70s. And they had just finished the zoning of Union County. Prior to that, it was totally unzoned. And when we went to the earlier meeting, we were told we should have paid no attention to the zoning because it didn't mean anything. But when they put the zoning in, they said it would eliminate us having to have happen to us exactly what's happening right now. That if we bought property, we would know there wouldn't be a junkyard going in next door or whatever. And so I would ask y'all to consider the commitment that was made by the county commissioners that zoning would mean something. And we were told that we should approach buying our house on a buyer beware basis. And I was shocked, and we were told we were stupid, and I guess I was, because I've always put a lot of faith in the county commission. And we could have gone to Weddington. They wanted us, but I felt like, and I've always felt like that the county commissioners, and I'll be very partisan, particularly the Republicans, would treat us fairly. And I would ask that y'all do that you treat us fairly. And I understand wanting 40% commercial, because I understand you need the tax base to help support all the services. That's very understandable. But we're not talking about $100,000 houses. Some of those houses are over $1 million. And if you sit there and devalue them, you're destroying part of one tax base to put in another small part. And what do? I saw a lady come in, and she was told that she shouldn't have paid any attention to the zoning, that it should have been buyer beware. And they went and spent $1 million or more in buying a house, and then were told, well, that was their tough luck. But they came and moved to Union County because it's a very desirable place to live. They invested, which is a lot of money. And I tell you, to me, it's an awful lot of money to live here and have this quality of life. Now, Mr. Lee referred to an earlier rezoning, and I'd like to feel like I'm a bit of a live and let live type of guy. But what was there was the old volunteer fire building. It's a prefab metal building, and somebody wanted to use it to do printing out of. Didn't hurt anybody. I've been by it umpteen times since they closed down the snack bar and the coffee and the ice cream that they were selling there, and y'all had it closed down because it wasn't permitted. There really is no traffic through there. You know, I guess 1 or 2 cars a day. You've got the interest of somewhere between 35 and 80, 90 homes over there, and that you consider these people and their investment. In the earlier, we were told that it was all going commercial. Well, one of you gentlemen lives in Weddington, and let me know when they're going commercial Providence Road down through the middle of Weddington. The county has, and I asked somebody, I didn't get the exact footage, 2,000 feet, and one of them is there with the volunteer fire department. The one on the corner's got a creek going through it and a high power line. I guess you could develop it, but somebody's gonna spend a lot of money to do it. 2 of the other corners have been developed, and you can get in and out, and it works fine for everybody, but we don't need coming up the road. And inside of your yellow circle across the street is a long-established church with a graveyard. Let me know how many people are eager to go start trying to dig up graves and take down a church to make it a community commercial area. I personally wouldn't want to vote for that. I'm hoping that you will look at what's balanced, because when you talk about rooftops, these houses generate a lot more money in taxes than the people spend. You're not talking about a $100,000 house with 4 kids where it takes a lot of dollars from somewhere else to support the services that the people need. So I would truly appreciate y'all giving it careful consideration, because these people sold off the land that this subdivision is on, and then they're gonna turn around and shaft the people that bought the land that they sold by selling off some more. And I don't blame the lady. If I owned it, I'd want to make a quick $0.75 too. It's a nice, easy way to make the money. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Robert Consoli. We have our little timer up here with the red light. I appreciate the 3 minutes if you would try to keep it concise.
Certainly. If not, maybe my wife will defer 3 minutes to me. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Robert Consoli, and I've been a resident of Chatsworth for a little over 2 years now. I've moved here from Charlotte to get away from the congestion, to get away from the traffic. Well, I didn't quite get away from the traffic, but I got away from the congestion. My wife here, we moved here. My wife is Judy Starnes Consoli. You may know that name. Her father's name is on the placard out here. He was a commissioner in 1972. The only reason I wanted to get up here is a few reasons. I wasn't able to make the planning commission meeting, but there was a comment made somewhat to the effect that, well, if your people were so interested, how come there's not many of them here? So would everybody from Chatsworth just stand? So now there's plenty of us here. There's over 30. We represent over half the households. And we don't want to see our community devalued. We don't want the people, I'm the president of the Homeowners Association. I don't want to see our residents who live on the cul-de-sac that you saw on that map have to look at the back of an office building for the rest of the time that they stay there. And if they can sell it at a reasonable price. The land, and as James Allen over here said, a buffer is absolute nonsense. The land slopes down from Providence Road down to our cul-de-sac. So 40 feet, even if you put a 10-foot buffer, you probably wouldn't even be at the beginning of the foundation of that building. And the other thing, and I'll finish with that, is there's over 30 of us here. I'm not sure if the owner of this parcel of land is even here. I know our attorney's here, but I'm not sure she's here. We have an interest in where we live. We're not here to make a profit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Melanie Cox. Oh, I'm sorry. Did we get Wanda Fuller?
I'm here just for questions. I'm the engineer.
Okay. R. McGinnis.
Dick McGinnis, I live at 1601 Hawkstone Drive. I don't have much to say because it's already been said, but one of the things they neglected to point out is that the realtor also has a vested interest. If you look at the realtor and go down Providence Road, he has a number of signs for child care centers, this being one of them. I don't know we have that crying need for child care centers, but he's the one that's going to really profit by this. He also referred to at the planning board meeting that this poor old lady living in the house, well, I don't know where she is. I think she's underground right now. Because the woman that owns it is 66 years old, and I sent you all a memo or email with a picture of the house she lives in, and I don't begrudge her, it's a nice house, but I wonder if she'd like to have the same building right out in front of her house, far out in Waxhaw, this is out toward Jars. So all I'm saying is that there's a lot of people here, besides the owner, including the realtor, who have a vested interest in seeing this happen, and we don't. We have a vested interest in seeing it not happen because it's going to ruin the value of our property.
Thank you, sir. Alan Paris.
Evening, Commissioners. I live at 1505 Hawkstone Drive on the backside, and I've been there about 6 years now. We've had as you know, there's a tremendous growth in all of Union County and in Waxhaw, especially coming down the traffic. I think on a planning, long-term planning, which is what's really key here. Yes, we want the businesses. We want to be able to walk down to town square, down to the town area there at some point in time. But we want to do it safely. I think that's, that's the first scenario that needs to be looked at, is the safety of all the people who are living in our different subdivisions there. Right now, we spend anywhere from 2 to 10 minutes getting out on traffic. That's over the 6-year period I've lived there. When I first lived there, I could get out in 2 seconds. You got a 6-year plan before we get the roads wide. We already put up a little farm stand just on the corner. It already, according to traffic queuing theory, just jams everybody up. You can't move. We're gonna increase it with another building right there without having proper medians, separation to get in and out. We've got kids that are just coming into the community and growing up very fast. We average 2 cars minimum per household coming out of our subdivision. Sorry for my sore throat, but I've been getting over a little flu bug, and I don't want to give it to anybody here. The impact of that alone on the traffic and the accidental possibilities of somebody getting hurt just increase tremendously. We want the long-term plan. We want to be able to take our bikes all the way into Waxhaw or wherever. That's why we bought into these communities. We understand growth. We're pro-growth. Most all of us want everybody to make a good amount of money, good amount of taxes. At the same time, we've got to look long run at what you as Union County Commissioners plan for us, and I hope you do the right thing by our community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. You're gonna have to help me. K-O-T-H-A-P-A-L-L-Y.
That's me. I wear my right to my thumbs, so they already closed.
Thank you, sir. Denise Truss, is that right?
Yes, Denise Truss is very good. I've been called Dennis. I'm going to talk for a few seconds here. You received an email from me over the weekend reiterating everything that's already been said. I think an important aspect of this is that we're talking about 67 owners at Chatsworth. Bob, our current HOA board president, already had all of us stand, which not quite 50% of us are here. But you also have a petition in front of you, which was signed by almost every homeowner in Chatsworth. There was a couple we couldn't get to. So I think what this demonstrates more than anything else, hopefully in your mind, is our concerns about what is being asked here, this rezoning process, not the process, but the rezoning of this property, and the potential economic environmental and safety issues that will incur, no doubt, to all of the residents of Chapels. Thank you.
Thank you. Matthew Baroni.
Hello, I'm a homeowner in Chatsworth, and I'm here. Lawyer did a good job, but I just wanted to let you guys know, as a Union County member, that if we look at the comprehensive plan, which I'm sure you guys are all very familiar with, it talks about neighborhood centers. What is a neighborhood center? What defines a neighborhood center according to the plan? Okay, do you guys know? Can anyone tell me? Give me a quick description. How wide is it?
Share with us.
0.25 miles, they talked about, walking distance. So as this lot barely falls within the 0.25 miles, okay, we'll give it that. This diameter is a generic number. Talk to anyone in the planning department. Tell them, ask them how big a neighborhood center is, and they won't give you a description, precise mark. So if this is in a walking distance, 0.25 miles, can you guys walk to this office building from the neighborhood center? Can you guys do it? Where's the neighborhood center at? The intersection of Newtown and Providence. Can you guys walk up there or ride your bikes up there? No. It's possible, not safely. So this is not within the neighborhood center for the 0.25 miles. Now what is a neighborhood center? It's going to evolve with a commercial center, and then what is it going to have after that? It's going to have higher density housing, then it's going to lead out into townhomes, apartments, and single family homes. Is that what this office is? A 1 acre lot out in the middle of residential 40. It doesn't comply with the neighborhood center at all. It's how much commercial land's already at that intersection. There's over 50 acres of commercial land already at that intersection. The neighborhood center, according to the plan, says 30,000 to 125,000 square feet. That can be met in under 10 acres of commercial land. So there's no need to put 1 acre of commercial out in the middle of residential 40. It just doesn't abide with the comprehensive plan. So I hope you guys do consider the comprehensive plan, and that whether this does jive with the comprehensive plan, if it does or it doesn't, but it certainly doesn't seem that putting this 1 acre in the middle of residential 40, 0.25 miles from a commercial center that you can't walk to, it doesn't seem to make sense to me. Thanks.
Thank you. That concludes our list of speakers. So at this time, we will close the public hearing. And Brian, if you have any final comments?
Yes, sir. I just want to go over the conditions and answer any questions you might have. So first off, I want to reiterate what the conditions are in the request. This is a conditional zoning request for office conditional. Under there are some specific uses that they have identified that some are general, but those categories are office use, other limited uses for commercial services being personal improvement services, studio, instructional or service, daycare center, animal services, grooming or training, supplies, and veterinary. They've also identified that the property will be, the building will be no bigger than 2 stories or 40 feet maximum. They've identified that they will comply with our photometric light plan requirement within the ordinance. We have a general provision where they can just provide a certain size light with downlighting. They've actually gone to say that they'll do a photometric light plan if this were approved. They've requested for vested rights on the property as they can if it were to be approved. And then of course they'll meet the other general requirements of the ordinance when it comes to the project. There is no site-specific plan. It does show some setbacks and some buffers, but this is more of a request as far as uses go. The planning board did meet on this in November, and they did give a recommendation. It was a 3-to-1 vote in favor of this request. Staff is also recommending approval of this. I will say that you know, the neighbors certainly have some valid concerns, and I want the board to understand that regardless of whether or not you feel that this is consistent with the comprehensive plan or not, the board can approve or deny a project regardless of whether it's consistent or inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. The statutes don't limit your ability to approve or to deny a request regardless of whether it's consistent or not. I want to make sure you're aware of that. Staff does feel this is consistent. It does fall within that area identified as a neighborhood center. The neighborhood center is a general category. It includes all types of commercial uses, retail, some office, some other commercial uses, restaurants. That quarter-mile service area is meant to be walkable, and I agree, this is not walkable at this point in time. However, there are plans for by 2023 that road to be widened and there'd be sidewalks added along that stretch of road that would provide for some pedestrian connectivity for this site. Also be aware that these properties here currently zoned residential. This one currently now zoned commercial as far as a conditional zoning. Ultimately, the board has to wrestle with what is the highest and best use of those properties. Is that residential? That's fine if that's what you believe the highest and best use of those properties. When we evaluate a piece of property and we give our recommendation, we look at all factors. And to be perfectly honest, we don't think that the highest and best use of those properties is single-family residential. That's your decision, not our decision. We merely give you a recommendation. At some point in time, this site will come to you. This site here will come to you, and this site here will come to you. So it is not uncommon for, on a stretch of a highway level type roadway, that you see commercial adjacent to the road and residential backing up to it. So staff's of the opinion that it does meet the comp plan. Obviously, the board has to make a decision on what you think is appropriate for that. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Commissioner Hales?
Yeah, Brian, you mentioned about the property between the print shop and this property.
Yes, sir.
That you've got a potential.
They have submitted a rezoning application at this time.
Is this commercial?
It is, yes, sir.
Okay. So all within that quarter mile is commercial?
The request, and of course, the board has to make that decision. Is this the appropriate approval for that?
Well, I know that the CRTPO planning boards is actually talking about a bike ped that'll be coming down through there, which would, you're talking 10 to 12 foot wide bike ped. So being able to communicate down there, to go down there will be, yeah, it's a few years out because DOT moves real slow.
You're absolutely right, yes, sir.
So, okay.
Commissioner Rushing, you had a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Restrictions on any of these, I do have some concerns over the animal services.
Yes, sir.
Especially.
And Mr. Lee did point out that it would be ancillary to a veterinary service. When I answered the question, that's what I was really thinking, but I didn't. It wouldn't be a kennel as a kennel operated by itself as a kennel. I'm sorry about that.
So is this like the other conditional zonings we've done where we can negotiate with the landowner to see if we can tighten these up? Because there are a lot of uses, and that was one thing that somebody had said in their comments, several, and the attorney had said there's really a broad spectrum of uses, maybe like the print shop where we dialed it down really tight.
Yes, sir.
Maybe that might be something to look at. If the house burned down, if the house was destroyed, or if the owner just decided they didn't like the house there, what could be put in that spot?
Currently, as it is, another house.
No mobile homes, no.
Actually, that is RA 40, I believe. RA 40 does allow mobile homes. Is it R40? R40 does not. I'm sorry. I thought that was RA 40. R40, there's a limit to what you can do in R40.
Okay. All right. And then the owners of the lot. I was looking at this today. I was doing research with it, and the adjacent owners there. I don't believe there's a house there, or the ones right behind it, in the neighborhood that's touching.
In this area here, I can turn on the aerial photo.
If you would, please.
That way you can here.
So those,
This is the, that is the old fire station, that's the one, then there's a little house here, so there is, right now, I think this is vacant at this point in time, at least according to the aerials we have back in 2015, and they may have changed, this is the
Right.
best aerial I have.
are the owners of
There
those,
could be a house here, this is their 2015 aerial,
are the owners of those lots here?
they may be, I'm not sure.
These,
The owner of those two vacant lots lives in Toronto, Canada.
oh, okay. Is, so there's a developer, there's no house on it, right? No houses on there right now?
Not yet. Now, I think it will be to put a building up.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, can I ask?
Commissioner Simpson has a question.
You have the setbacks listed here and the max height. Is there I guess, a requested square footage for this?
There is not. The way it's been portrayed is that once they identify the uses that they will actually have on there, I think they intend on marketing it to different uses. Once they have a use established, that would dictate the size of the building and the parking. Now, I did sort of a quick, rough estimate based on just office. And again, this is just an estimate. Parking is one space for every 300 square feet of office space. That's our standard with our ordinance. Based on the lot, which is about an acre, that's about how much the developable property is. They also have to accommodate setbacks, which they cannot build within the setbacks. That takes up almost half an acre on the property. They could conceivably get somewhere between 10 to 12,000 square feet of office space and meet the parking requirements. And that's an estimate. That doesn't mean that that's 100% accurate. That's just a down and dirty. This is what I think could go there based on no other constraints on that property. That doesn't mean that's what would come. That's just a guess.
Any further questions? Thank you, Brian.
Yes, sir.
At this time, it's time for informal comments. We do not have a sign-up sheet. Is there anyone here who wanted to speak on an issue other than the public hearing? So just raise your hand. Seeing none, we will close our informal comments and move to additions, deletions, and adoption of the agenda. And we have several of those. I'd like to start with item 24 on consent. I'd like to ask that we just remove that from the agenda completely. Then I will look to the board for any other changes. Mr. Rushing?
I'm not sure if we can do this, but we have those road renamings on the consent agenda.
That is item 23, and we will move that to 29A for discussion.
Maybe just
We
pull the whole thing.
yeah,
Put it on record.
yeah, 29A. Anyone else?
We have card.
I'm get to
action on
this,
card.
yeah. Okay, I believe we have a couple of other housekeeping issues, an appointment to the, regarding the Cardinal Innovations
Yes, sir.
issue. Would you like to just explain what that is to us? And
Yes, sir. As the board is aware through email communications and probably other means, the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners is looking for a commissioner from each of the 20 counties that are within the Cardinal Innovations service area to be identified to serve on a nominating committee to identify new board members for that particular organization. And they have requested that anyone that, any of the 20 counties select, that we provide that name no later than December 8th, which is why we are requesting that be added to this agenda.
okay, thank you. We'll make that item 29B. And then I believe we had an item to add to the consent agenda, amendment to amended and restated employment contract, Second Amendment and Third Amendment, and adoption of budget amendment number 9, added to consent. Commissioner Higgins.
Motion to approve the agenda as amended.
We have a motion to approve as amended. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Next item is our consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent as amended.
We have a motion. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, none. All righty. That will take us to our old business.
Yes, Commissioners, during your November 20th meeting, you had requested some additional information from staff as it related to what type of staff time would be required in order to provide some of the information that had been requested. Mr. Yates has met with Mr. Harold, of our tax administrator, and between finance and tax administration, they have come up with an estimate. Mr. Yates?
Yes, after talking with Van, Harold and his shop, and discussing it with the state, it's kind of as I feared, that the data is a little harder to get to than we'd hope. We estimate it'll be about 35 to 45 hours to gather that data, do the analytics, and try to massage it to make it useful. But I do think it's important to note, even our initial projections, if we were saying 25% off to give you an order of magnitude, that's about $16,000 a penny when we were talking about that countywide fire tax or the 6th district tax. So while we were talking about a lot of value, it takes a lot of value from the vehicle perspective to move that dial. So in answer to the original question, it's about 35 to 45 staff hours to get there, and it would still be at that point an estimate and kind of an extrapolation based on the data in front of us. And I'll take any questions you have about that.
Questions? Commissioner Helms.
I understand the concern with 35, 45 hours. We've probably got hundreds of hours already. We've delayed this for 3 years. And we need to make a good, best effort basis on what that will be. And if we don't look at how we're gonna know. You know, I know that we know where the automobiles are because we tax them today. So, but we don't know what the revenue will be generated off of fire tax for that.
I think the issue is not that we don't know where the vehicles are, is that the state doesn't tax them in that way, so we don't have the tax set that would allow us to identify what vehicle goes exactly with which district and which property. The work that we talked about, and I met with Van and his group for a good while last week to talk about how we would do this. It would be an extrapolation based on deduction. So we would start with countywide and move things out and try to kind of get it honed into what that would be. And then I'm not suggesting that it's proper, improper, or how we would go about that. I'm just telling you that based on our estimate, we think it's a project that will take that amount of time. So.
Any further questions for Jeff?
Do we need a board action to move forward with that? In my view, that time is pretty small, considering that this has been something that's been going on for at least while I've been on the board. So if we can get the information and try and come up with a solution this year, I think it would be helpful.
I think that part of the question last time was then what the timeline would be for pulling that together. So that's probably going to be sometime mid to late January, if I had to guess, that's how long it would take us to get it together with the holidays and staff coming in and out over the next. So if the board wants to direct us to do that, recognize it'll probably be somewhere along the second meeting in January or possibly the first meeting in February, because the January meetings fall really early this next year.
But if that's the board's desire, yes, I would request that you put that in form of a motion.
Well, I think also what was requested was a breakdown by the taxation process. And I know that I spoke with one individual who lived in the fee districts, and he said, I'm already paying a tax, fire tax, because they've paid a fire tax on that individual vehicle. So we know where they are. And I know that, my background with IBM and yours with IT, computers can do a lot of consolidating and identifying where things are because you've already got the tax base saying they're in a fee district. So I'll make a motion that we we do the work necessary, target second meeting in January to come back and give us an idea, because we've got to move forward. We pushed this item off for, like Lance said, the last 3 years. It's time we get this resolved. It's a 25-year-old process that no longer works. You can't sustain it. So we need to know what we're dealing with.
Okay, we have a motion before us. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? 27, employee survey.
Yes, sir. At your November 6th meeting, the board discussed conducting an employee survey. At that point in time, there was no direction given other than to have human resources come forward and provide you with their thoughts and recommendations. So Mr. Watson is here this evening to do just that.
Good evening.
Oh, you need your red hat, Mark.
I'm trying to get in the spirit of the holidays. When you got 2 little granddaughters running around the house, 2 and 5, you gotta do something special. As Manager Koto alluded to in the November 6th meeting, the board did discuss the topic of employee survey. And as you read the agenda abstract, I think it's worth noting that we viewed that discussion multiple times to make sure we were capturing exactly what the board wanted in terms of information. And as stated here, there was expressed interest that emerged during that discussion in the following key elements of the survey process: establishing the expectations first on what the survey should accomplish. And the language here, I'm taking almost verbatim from the language, your statements in that meeting. Developing a timeline, soliciting proposals, selecting the best consultant. You were interested in the Board of County Commissioner interaction with the consultant and the survey and in receiving the survey results, and conducting surveys on a regular basis and doing it well. I think Mr. Simpson made that statement about doing it regularly and doing it well. And I think that's a very important element in this whole discussion. Among the information related to employee survey that was specifically asked for, one regarded opportunities to conduct and complete an employee survey by July 1. 2 was regarding capabilities, and I have to assume that is related to both the capabilities of staff to administer such a process and potentially capabilities of consultants. And then the appropriate process of what HR would like to see accomplished in the survey. So I've given a great deal of thought to this. Expectations for the objectives of gathering information through the employee survey process determine the type of survey best suited for the task. Any employee survey's main purpose should be to engage the employees in a two-way communication process, with the organization first listening to the collective voice of the employees. Organization surveys generally focus on one of 3 objectives. First, and probably more traditionally, they measure the satisfaction or mood of the workforce. 2, they determine how engaged, disengaged, or actively disengaged the workforce is in achieving the purpose of the organization. And thirdly, gaining an understanding of the employee's view, or how the employees view the total workplace experience. And this is relatively new to the process or concept of conducting employee surveys. It's this idea of understanding how employees view the total workplace experience. Particular attention is being paid in organizations to generational differences. I'll speak to that in a minute. ethnic differences, gender differences, and so on. And as we grow as an organization and we become more and more diverse in our employee population, it is very important for us to pay close attention to these differences in viewpoints that our employees have, because they do come into place nearly every day, as we experience, where employees may not see eye to eye on the same topic in the same way. The objectives for this survey process have yet to be determined. I'll speak to that in just one moment. But let's talk about the timeline for conducting a survey. And what I'd like to do is recap the 2015 Workplace Dynamic survey process timeline. Generally, that took about 6 to 7 months from initiation of the new process to communicating the results to the employees. Quickly and briefly, that process began in March 2015. We had begun a request for proposal development. April 2015, by April 2015, Workplace Dynamics had been selected, largely in part because of their association with the Charlotte Observer survey process and the tools that they offered. April 2015, that survey was conducted. May 2015, the results were delivered. Enhanced reporting packages were purchased. As I think has been noted in the past, the conducting the survey part was at no cost to the organization in terms of dollar outlay to that process. There was quite a bit of staff time invested in that survey process, however, and that does cost the organization. But in order to gain access to the meat of the information that was coming back to us in that process, we needed to purchase the enhanced reporting package, and we did. June 2015, the results results were reviewed with service area directors. Action plans had begun to be developed on addressing certain needs that were identified in the survey. That extended into July 2015. By August 4th of 2015, the board was briefed on the results, and in September, October 2015, the county manager was communicating the survey results to employees through a series of group meetings, one-on-one, face-to-face time, etc. The time frame of a survey process to be completed by July 1 is largely dependent upon the why we are doing it, how we will do it, and the approach to the survey itself. Capabilities, regardless of the survey process, the available workload capacity of staff to either administer or support a comprehensive survey of the entire employee population is a major consideration. To illustrate the current workload capacity to support such an effort, particularly in the human resource area and other areas, interdisciplinary areas that would support this, the organization is currently involved in several major projects that could potentially impact the validity of any employee survey types administered during the next 6 months. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Now, the other thing I'd like to point out is the majority of these projects that I'm going to mention have been in the planning stages, in the implementation process, or in the process for quite some time. Our work on these types of large-scale projects generally is occurring 6, 8, 10 months out at least in order to accomplish and gain the results that we need in these types of activities. First, I should mention that in order of these projects is the classification and compensation study that is currently underway. It has been underway for several months, and I would say that we will be still heavily involved in this through the month of February into the first part of March. The second major project that's been underway is a reorganization of the Department of Social Service. Some of that project is supported by the class comp study impacts. In this organization, reorganization of DSS, there has been substantial change to the structure. And an important point to make is that over 50% of the employees now have new direct report supervisors. In our last 2015 survey, one of the strength, I would say probably the main strength that our organization had was the relationship or the connection the employees had with their direct report supervisor. And as we have learned over time, that when you talk about employee engagement and you talk about having employees all aligned in the same process, same project, same purpose in the organization, the real communication and real attachment to the organization that employees have is with their direct report supervisor. So you can see that with such a substantial change in supervisors, that could, and I'll be very frank with you, I have some concerns about how that may impact the validity of an employee survey in the Department of Social Services, especially when those employees would not yet have been able to form meaningful relationships with those supervisors, and would not between now and July 1, they would just have received their first evaluation from these new supervisors in part. So I do have some concerns about how that may impact the survey process. This is not a project, but it goes along with something that I believe is very important. We've had, over the course of the past 12 months, we are currently either in the process of hiring a number of division directors, or have hired those division directors and they are relatively new in their role. Again, I think the same concern about the relationships with their direct report and their direct reports is a valid one and should be taken into consideration when considering the possibility of conducting an employee survey. In addition, Human Services is just full of projects these days. And I have to poke a little fun at Michelle because we spend a lot of time together. The Human Services Health and DSS is set to move into their new building late January, early February timeframe generally. Another major project we have in place that is reaching the end stages of its initial process or initial phase is the workforce strategic planning process. That has a lot to do with identifying the gaps that we have in experience within the organization. It identifies and helps us to plan for not leaking institutional knowledge when somebody leaves the organization, but retaining that institutional knowledge within the organization. A lot of work has gone into that, and we are currently in the phases of wrapping up the first real process of that, I guess is the best way to put that, and to begin to implement that on a service area basis. And lastly, the performance evaluation process. We'll be getting that underway in the month of February. Those are due in May, so that is also a major consideration. I think I've made my point about these types of activities that are critical to the organization that we've been engaged in that must be completed, and the fact that many of them may impact the results of an employee survey at this particular time, particularly before July 1. When we talk about appropriateness of a process, as I mentioned earlier, when we talk about gathering employee viewpoints, the actual process of gathering employee viewpoints and the methodology for interpreting the information, which is just important, is the interpretation of the information is just as important as how you gather the information, has undergone some significant changes in the last 4 to 6 years. Even since we conducted the 2015 employee survey, there have been quite a large number of research projects on the topic, and is one of the, if you could say it's a hot topic in the area of organizational development. Employee surveys is it right now. One of the things that I thought about as I was thinking about how much change is taking place in the employee survey process over the last few years, I really think it's worth noting that during this same 4 to 6 year period of time, Union County as an employer has also undergone some of the most significant organizational change of its long history. And I think we can all sitting here today, we can relate to that, not only in terms of its structure, but also in terms of the expectations for how services are delivered, how employees receive feedback on their work performance, how leadership skills are developed, and the willingness of this organization to collect and acknowledge direct feedback from employees through several methods, including the 2015 employee survey process. And I mention that because historically, traditional local government organizations have not been very receptive to acknowledging or accepting that kind of direct employee feedback. Part of that comes from just the old traditional employee satisfaction survey and how that information, how the questions were asked and how the information was delivered, and then the understanding of folks on what do you do with it when you get it. You know, is it just, you know, are we listening to a collective employee voice in addressing larger issues within the organization that help the organization move forward and be productive, or are we just drilling into specific concerns and those types of things? One of the things that I'd like to do really briefly is to share some generational information with you on the makeup of our organization. And this really starts to come into play. As I was preparing for this, I had my staff to pull these stats, and I was a little bit surprised by the statistics, quite frankly. If we look at all full-time employees by generation, and I think the premise is that technology, in large part, has changed how each generation interacts, how they receive information, what their expectations for the speed at which feedback is given and those types of things occurs. And we have actually done a lot of training with our supervisors, managers, and directors on this whole topic of multi-generational communication within the workplace. Full-time employees by generation in Union County, 21% are baby boomers. 44.2% are Generation X. Now, Generation X is, are those individuals born between 1965 and 1981. Okay? Millennials. There's a lot of talk about millennials and their impact not only in society but in the workplace today. 34% of our workforce are millennials, born between 1982 and 2002. Now, when we look at this statistic and we look at research data that has come back from the likes of IBM and Gallup and I want to say it's Watson Towers, but I believe that's correct. We as an organization have a younger workforce percentage-wise than most local, state, or federal entities, or federal agencies, state agencies and federal agencies. We have a younger workforce by percentage. Now, let's contrast that with leadership. So if we look at all the leaders, whether you're an executive director, a division director, a manager, or supervisor within the organization, 62% of those individuals are Generation X, 25% are baby boomers, millennials make up 13% already. When we look at the executive team, or the executive directors, 69% are baby boomers. So with very different communication styles. 6% are millennials and 25% are Generation X. So to the point that as we consider an employee survey, we have to consider how these generations communicate with their employer, what their expectations for communicating with their employer, because they're all different. And we need to acknowledge that, and we need to your point, we need to do it right. Okay? So generational diversity requires us to examine how we listen to an employee voice, how we develop our understanding of what's being communicated, and how we respond in both action and information. So how should we proceed? I guess that's the question. In the board's discussion at the November 6th meeting, there other than coming back and providing this information, there wasn't a great deal of consensus on how we should proceed. Given the statements I've already made about the projects that are currently underway, the potential impacts to the validity of an employee survey, if you were to ask me concerning human resource best practices or just business best practices, I would tell you this is probably not the correct time to be administering an employee survey. That does not mean that we can't begin the process of developing the objectives of a survey. It does not mean that we can't begin the process of developing the methodology for conducting the survey, or establishing a timeline that could, within a very reasonable amount of time, meet the objectives of the board. Now, I feel compelled to say that staff is here to take and deliver on your direction. Okay, but I think I have to give you the facts of the matter as I see them. Okay? I do believe that an appropriate time frame for conducting an employee survey would be perhaps in the maybe beginning with the survey process itself in the August, September time frame, with the deliverables very soon after that. How the objectives get identified, how the process gets identified, I think we're going to need some direction from the board. I believe that, as we have experienced with a number of our larger projects, that an interdisciplinary team of individuals from across the organization with various backgrounds and skill sets would probably be best to help to, or at least give input on the development of the objectives, and perhaps identify the most effective methods for conducting the survey. I will throw that out as a suggestion for the board. If you had to ask me what, and you have, what does HR want to see? And I have spoken to my staff about this. We would like to see a process that listens to the collective voice of the employee. We would like to see a process that is ongoing, that is not a one and done type situation. A process where we can gather information this year, build on it next year and the year after and the year after. And a very good example of that, believe it or not, is the federal government's Office of Personnel Management. And I thought I would never give that as an example, but I am going to give that as an example. If you go to the federal employee viewpoint survey results, it's very easy to look up on the website, on the internet. They've just released their 2017 results, and I have to tell you, it's an excellent piece of work. They've been doing the survey, and it has evolved in its questions and its reporting and the types of information they're learning to glean out of the information they get over the past decade. And you know, if we're going to give the employees a voice and we're going to listen to it, we need to be doing something similar on an ongoing basis. So with that, I've taken quite a bit of your time, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate you listening to the information I've had to share with you, and I'll be glad to answer any questions. If I have an answer, I'll be glad to provide it.
I believe Mr. Rushing has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, used to the way the county commissioners got their information was somebody gave you a phone call in the middle of the night. So, you know, we've kind of moved away from that with the size of the organization, and the feedback that we got from that 2015 survey really helped in some of my budget making decisions, because just like needing more help at social services, those type of areas that we could look at and say, hey, what is going on here? Do we need to provide additional employees, things like that. Right. So it's real important that we do hear from the employees, no matter what generation they are, because the Generation Xers are going to be they're going to be the old geezers to the next generation and the following generations and the following.
They're the folks we're developing right now in their.
And we want those to be those that be the employees that are retiring with Union County and serving us for a long time. So we need to know what they think, and I don't really I don't have a preference as to who company does it or whatever, but it is important that I think that we do a survey. I understand. I think that Union County Public Schools used to maybe still do some type of survey every year. You know, with technology, it's not impossible. With the companies that are doing it, it's not impossible, and it could be very inexpensive. But yeah, doing it right, doing it where we can just hear from the employees that we're going in the right direction. That they're the front line. I got in a car with the vice president of a company I worked for before, and he said, "You know who the most important employee of the company is?" I said, "You are, of course." He said, "No, it's the guy at the very bottom, because that's where everything starts." And he's right, and we need to hear what they say. So, you know, I'm still in favor of doing a survey. I think we need to do it, you know, as often as possible. Do it right, like Chairman Simpson said. and do it where it's not breaking the bank either. I don't think we need to find the most expensive
No,
survey that we
I
can.
agree. I think it can be done very affordable. I had it written down here, and I didn't mention this point earlier, and while you were talking, I thought of it, and now I just forgot it. So I'll think of it again.
Listen, you said enough. You've said a lot. I'm good with what you said. I get where you're coming from, especially to the point of the social services moving. But I want to know what they think of the new building. I want to know how they feel about, is this a positive change that we've made?
So I just thought of what I forgot before, okay? When we talk about the research on the collective employee voice is, employees, or organizations gather information from employees in a lot of different ways other than just employee surveys. We right now gather information in exit interview process, and we've just totally revamped that process. It's a lot more effective than it has been in the past. The information is disseminated throughout the management and the organization more quickly, but that is a way of listening to the employee voice. The suggestion and comment piece that the manager runs through her office is a way of listening to the employee voice. There are other ways of listening to the employee voice, and one of my hopes would be that through, if we engage in this process and there's an interdisciplinary team that works with it, that we're able to not only garner the information from the survey, but also these other sources within the organization that we already have. We just having a hard time getting our arms around it and bring it in together in a meaningful format so we can make use of it.
Other question, Commissioner Helms?
I appreciate the time you've dealt into this, and I think you will agree that the most valuable assets we have in this county are our people.
Absolutely.
The 2015 survey was the first one in 19 years, if I recall.
Right.
And I had opportunity to sit in on the Compton class presentation by a consultant. It was very impressive. And he made the comment that it's an absolute necessity to do a survey once a year. And I've only been here 5 years, but I can't remember a year we wouldn't have things that say we're too busy to do it. But I think we cannot be too busy not to do it. I think it's real important. The 15 survey came back very negative. It did say that, like you said, the supervisors were, the lower level supervisors were very highly rated. But we've made a lot of changes. I live by a survey every year in IBM, and one of the things you make changes, if you wait too long to ask, you're so that far down the road, you're in a ditch. So, like Commissioner Rushing, I think it's something we need to proceed with and let our people have a voice. The thing about the feedback to the manager, that's a good tool. But the survey is more of a blind, and everybody's taking it, and so you're not laying out your saying, here, this is my comment, but you can ascertain what areas you need to work on. So I understand your concern with the July 1st, but I think we need to proceed with working toward this, getting a survey so our employees know we care. And I'd love to have the survey tell them that we love this new building. Or if there's a problem with it, we need to know that too. So, and I see some heads nodding out there that they've been down that road too. So,
Commissioner Simpson.
I appreciate the information. I will defer to your HR experience in an August or September timeframe. If you feel that's the best to get the most accurate information, I'm good with that. And with the deliverables afterwards, I don't know if you can give us a date at this point, or if you want to give us a date at our next meeting on when those deliverables you think could be.
Oh, I'll tell you, I would like to engage in this conversation with a larger group of my peers, because they also bring some valuable insight into when is a reasonable time frame for the deliverables to be brought forward. And I think this needs to be an organizational-wide effort, not just an HR effort.
But I'm good with deferring to August or September if you feel that would be best for the most accurate information.
Thank you.
I concur.
I agree.
Mark, we appreciate your hard work on that. I would, having listened to comments, I would move that we ask the manager to work with Human Resources to develop a objective of how that employee survey may take place and a time frame for it to be delivered in the second half of 2018.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Who's none? All right. Yes, sir. Thank you. And I promised I would never be accused of this again. So we're going to take a 5-minute break.
Thank you.
All righty, we'll start back with our new business, item number 28, the comprehensive annual financial report.
Yes, this is for the period ending June 30th, 2017, and Mr. Yates will introduce our auditor, who will give you a very brief overview of our audit this year.
Excellent. And before I do that, I just want to remind the board this is one of the 2 major processes we do on an annual basis. So this is our official close to FY 2017. So we have tonight for you Dan Goddard. I know it says Goddard. Thank you. From Jerry Becker and Holland to present for us tonight. He'll go over our audit, and then I'll follow with a look at the year-end results. Before I turn over to Dan, I want to say that this is a team effort across the county. Debbie Cox in our office, who's our controller, and Beverly Lyles head that team up for us, but it's also a lot of work done in the services, a lot of work done in the tax office, and all over the place. So what you see tonight and what you have at your seat with the CAFR is the culmination of thousands of man hours and a lot of effort put in from your staff. And I'll jump to the end and kind of take the win out of Dan's sales. It's a clean audit, so we're very proud of that. So I'm happy to kind of give that to you tonight. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan.
Good evening, everyone. So I wanted to go over today, we have an agenda here. We want to go over the client service team, who is actually working on your audit this year, the role of our external auditor, what is expected out of us, what are we complying with when we do our audit report, key highlights from the audit, very brief, very concise in terms of what we found, key items during our audit, accounting standards down the road that are going to affect the county, and then summarize and let you have any time for any questions or comments. So first of all, our audit team has been the same for the last 3 years that we have served for Union County as the external auditor. Eddie Burke has headed up the team as the partner. Myself, I'm the audit senior manager on this engagement. And then we had Courtney McKenzie as the audit senior and Sarah Jane Dietz as the staff this year. In terms of our role as the external auditor, we planned the audit. Our planning began back in April, May, when we first met with the county and had discussions about the timeline of the audit, what was expected, and gaining an understanding of changes that occurred over the past year that we would need to know in order to risk assess the audit. And then we performed the audit over the remainder of the summer into the fall time frame of September and October, issuing our opinion as of October 31st at the end of October. And then lastly, as part of the audit, we express our opinion in that audit opinion dated 10/31, and then we communicate to those in charge of governance, which is you, our independence, in that we are independent of the county, and which is an important pillar of our audit profession. And then changes that we had during the audit, which is what we're going to be discussing today. In terms of our opinion, as Jeff said, we had a clean opinion, the highest opinion you can get in terms of an audit. We have 4 opinions that we give each year. The first being on the financial statements. Second, Yellow Book, which is the federal standards that they have to abide by in terms of laws and regulations. Then we have the single audit, which is federal and state, in which we are giving opinions on the use of grants spent by the county at the federal and state level. In terms of our single audit, I'll go into detail what programs we tested this year. We had only one finding this year in our testing of Medicaid. There was 111 cases pulled for testing. We found 6 that had incorrect documentation on file, but overall the eligibility was not an issue. All participants that were tested were determined to be overall eligible, and so there was no question cost or material weakness or significant deficiency. So what we consider a non-material non-compliance. While the documentation wasn't there, it didn't affect anything in terms of your spending, in terms of your guidance or oversight of those funds. In terms of our SAS 114 letter, that's our letter that is required to be presented to you in a number of these slides. We are discussing those topics that are on that letter. One of those topics is that we had no adjusting journal entries this year. There were 2 past adjusting journal entries, and those journal entries were not considered material to the financial statements or passed on by management and agreed to by us. And they related mostly to the implementation of a new accounting standard requirements that were not material to the financial statements overall. And then lastly, we had the implementation of the new accounting standards, GASB 74, which is the first standard related to your other post-employment benefits, in which we were showing disclosures in your notes, which are disclosed in Note 9, which we actually gave an emphasis of matter paragraph in our audit report to alert the reader that Note 9 is where that information is found. And it just gives you more information about the OPEB liability overall for the county and inputs used by the actuaries in determining that liability. And then for other matters here, we have 3 management letter comments. One was now for management letter comments, they did not rise to the level of a material weakness or significant deficiency in the internal control structure at the county. They were opportunities we felt that we could provide some guidance on bettering processes at the county, but were not in any way an issue with internal controls overall at the county. The first one had to deal with pensions and in terms of adopting a year end for the plan and OPEB assets in regards to the implementation of GASB 74. And then the second one had to do with IT access controls, and that is just a review of those controls in place just to make sure that people have appropriate access and those that have left have been cut off in those controls. It's not to say that there was any instances of that. It's just a review process we would like to see implemented to make sure that no issues arise from that. And then lastly, we have the subsidized childcare cluster. We had one finding which we did not feel is a single audit finding, but it was documentation from years ago that was not on file. We found documentation on all the current files, so the processes in place are good and well in the current state. And so we did not feel that one issue from years ago was indicative of the internal control environment today. In terms of key highlights here, as we go over each year, we try to, part of our audit process is determining your significant transaction cycles, in which we've determined your accounts receivable billing revenues, tax revenues in particular, to be a significant transaction cycle of the county in which we gain understanding, making sure that we're doing a walkthrough, making sure we're understanding the internal control process in place and that it's appropriate for the county. We have capital assets, which is a large material balance on your balance sheet, which we're making sure they have appropriate custody of those assets and they're properly classified and being depreciated. Accounts payable disbursements, we're making sure your payables are correct and that their disbursements are being made in accordance with your policies. Payroll, treasury debt, budgeting, and financial statement close process. These are all processes that we're walking through from beginning to end to make sure that they're appropriate. In terms of our journal entry testing, we use a software called Active Data. It's an extension of Excel, which allows us to put journal entries into certain populations, allows us to identify those entries that may be posted on a weekend, those entry round numbers, those entries that were infrequent accounts. It allows us to dive down while the county has a lot of journal entries they post during the year. We can dive into those particular areas that are particular concern, and we found no issues with the testing of those journal entries this year. In terms of IT controls, we are doing a review as part of our scope of our audit at a very high level, that you have the controls in place. That's where that IT access review comment came into place, by review of your policies and procedures over IT, that backup and recovery is being done, and not only that backup and recovery is being implemented, but that actual testing of the backup is being done. We've seen clients in other industries that lose their data and then try to run the backup, and they are unsuccessful, especially in this day and age, which I'm going to talk about as well as cybersecurity, with ransomware out there. If an employee is hit with the ransomware and you don't have a legitimate backup that you can run, then you're at the mercy of the ransomware. And just in general, cybersecurity with the data breaches over the last year, over the last 10 years, it's just been increasing. And that partner on this, Eddie, had attended a cybersecurity conference and had a professional hacker who gave his address to them and said it's not a matter of if you're going to get hacked, it's a matter of when. I mean, people are out there trying to get this data. I mean, you have very secure data with the HIPAA policies at DSS in particular, and so IT control and ever diligence to the cybersecurity and making sure your processes are up to date and employees are trained on how to avoid these type of things is very important. In terms of our key highlights, systemic audit areas, you have your cash and investments, accounts receivable, revenues, and capital assets. Liabilities, you have your payables, expenses, accrued expenses, payroll, so on. These are the same areas that we had alerted you of in prior audits. Nothing has changed here in terms of the significant audit areas. And then other areas we're looking at is related party transactions to make sure they're properly disclosed, that your estimates are reasonable and accurate, that you have your leases recorded properly, and that there's no legal litigation out there that needs to be accrued on the financial statements. In terms of our internal controls and compliance over single audit, the programs we tested this year was medical assistance and subsidized childcare. And then for state programs, it was medical assistance also kind of falls in the state side because you have state and federal dollars, and cross-cutting, which is a program of your administrative dollars spent in these DSS type programs like medical assistance, TANF, and others. In terms of new accounting standards, next year you're going to implement GASB 75, which is putting the total liability of OPEB on your balance sheet at the government-wide level. This is the second part of the two-step process to implement the OPEB standards for the county. And so in summary, we had clean opinions, no AJEs, 2 passed journal entries, no financial statement findings, 1 single audit finding, 3 management letter comments, and again, full cooperation from management. I do want to thank Jeff, Debbie, and Beverly, the team, and then across all departments as well for their efforts and help in getting this audit complete. Everyone that we've encountered took this very seriously and was able to get us the documentation we needed when requested and timely. So I'll leave that up. Any questions or comments?
Thank you.
Thank you.
We need a motion to accept the comprehensive annual financial report for the year ended June 30th, 2017.
So moved.
We have a motion. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Takes us to item 29, review of the fiscal year 2017 financial results.
Yes, as the board will recall, during our budget work session, we talked about bringing to you on a monthly basis kind of where we are financially. Since we just completed our audit, we thought this would be appropriate time for kind of the beginning point as to where we are with respect to fund balance and all of our funds. And Mr. Yates has a brief presentation to go over with the board.
Thank you.
Good evening, thank you. So Dan gave you the lowdown on the financial statement, so I'm here to kind of talk about exactly what happened and kind of how the numbers played out. So for today, we're going to look at the year-end results, specifically focused on the general fund. and then review of the fund balances and additional uses analysis. And what you'll see is we have quite a few funds in the county. We primarily focus on the general fund, which is the main tax fund, but as you'll see, there's 2 pages worth of different funds that serve different purposes. And we'll get into a little bit more detail about that when we get there. When we're looking at revenue, and we're going to talk about the revenue variance, and again, this is the general fund, I think it's important to kind of look at some measures of success to determine how we did when we estimated. So if you look, our final revenue budget was about $162.4 million. Our actual revenue last year was about 166.7. And when looking at that, it looks like we're about 4.3 million more than we estimated. But we have to take into consideration that the general statutes prescribe kind of how we have to estimate ad valorem. So we adjust out the amount of revenue that we see that was above that statutory requirement. In other words, if we wanted to estimate higher, we wouldn't be allowed to because we'd be outside of that statutory limitation. And when we do that and adjust that out, what we see is we were about $2 million off when it comes to estimating revenue, about 1.26% over. So our goal is always to be between 1 to 2.5% over, because I would consider, or better to be over versus under revenue. But if we consider ourselves, if we were under 1%, we consider ourselves razor thin or just really more lucky than skilled at it. And if we were more than 2.5, we'd consider ourselves really out beyond the edge of that. So we feel like on the revenue estimating, we're pretty much where we want to be. And this includes all the revenues in the general fund. So the primary being sales taxes, but also intergovernmental revenues, permits, charges for service. So they all move up and down, but in a total aggregate total, this is where we ended up. And we can do the same thing when looking at expenditures. Our final expenditure budget was about $168 million. Our actual expenditures in 2017 were about $158.8. So that looks like about $9.2 million underspent. But then we start looking at different components that go into that equation. The first part you can look at is about $1.3 million of unspent obligations or encumbrances, things that we didn't finish that were in process at the end of the year. So for instance, we order goods, or we order vehicles, or we order different types of things, or we have outstanding contracts that aren't complete by June 30. So we roll those. Well, if you're doing just a straight up actual comparison of budget to actual, you wouldn't see that, but those things were encumbered, meaning they were committed to, but not actually received or spent. We also have our economic development grants. So those grants that we approve, they are based on investment by the businesses and so forth. We have to budget the full amount of our obligation to those contracts, but they're only triggered with investments from the business community or from the entity we're granting to. So we have about $1.5 million of grants that went unused last year. We have about $1.4 million of public assistance payments. And those are based on people walking in, eligibility, and different things. So those aren't, we estimate how many of those folks are going to come in, but it's really based on that eligible population and the usage. Then we have legal contingencies, pooled costs, and other contingencies of about $670,000. And then we had outside agency funding for our various community partners, of which we don't manage, of about $670,000. So when you adjust for these that are really not manageable expenses underneath underneath our control, we see we're about 2.1%, 2.2% underspent comparatively. So again, we're aiming for that 1 to 2.5% area. It's a little closer to that 2.5% limitation, but we feel like that that it was well within what we would consider a reasonable variance. So then there's a lot of reasons for that, and there's thousands and thousands of lines. Just make this up, but I think in looking at it being about 1%, 1.25% on revenue, 2%, 2.2% on expenditures, that's right where we want to be, and it worked in our favor. We're underspent, and we got just a little bit more revenue than we anticipated. So where does that leave us on fund balance? And I think one of the questions that was asked during our strategic planning session is, what are the components of fund balance? There's the non-spendable piece, which are things you can't spend, prepaids, long-term notes, those kinds of things. The restricted, those are items that are restricted by outside law that you can't control as a board. There's the committed, These are done at the highest level. This is where we reserve our fund balance policy levels and so forth. Then there's assigned. This is, we talked about that roll of expenditures and those roll of contracts or our next year's budgeted fund balance usage. That's where this commitment would show up. And then unassigned, which is the amount above all those other things, or what we would refer to as the appropriable fund balance. So as you can see, when we look at the June 30 going from 2016 to 2017, the difference between 2017 revenue and expenditures raw would be about $7.9 million. So that was the total change in fund balance. And you can see through this table exactly the changes between the not spendable, the restricted, the committed. We added about just under $1 million to our appropriable fund balance or unassigned fund balance. So as I mentioned, we have lots of different funds. So I'll show you the listing and then we can talk about any specific ones you'd like. We have the general funds, which includes the general fund, which is the one we were just looking at, our general tax fund, the school's budgetary fund. This is about $3.2 million in unassigned fund balance there. And if you remember, we have a process in place that uses that money for capital projects coming up in the next budget cycle. So that'll be the starting place for one-time use for the capital projects. We have the school's radio budgetary fund. It has a negative unassigned fund balance of just over $1 million. And what that represents is really the note that we're carrying for the schools. We purchased radios instead of letting them lease them, and they're paying us back on an annual basis. So that's the remainder of what is owed for those radios. Countywide fire budgetary fund, that's where the penny 4 goes, 0.04 goes. There's about $32,000 there. And then the countywide EMS budgetary fund of about $400,000, almost $420,000. We have the enterprise funds, the water and sewer fund. In this case, it's the unassigned fund balance that's adjusted for the 365-day reserve policy. So that is the above policy level. But keep in mind that you intentionally have that high for capital use. So we're draining that down. As you can see, we used about $8.5 million last year to pay for capital projects. As designed, your rate, we have a smooth rate, so that allowed us to build up cash early, and we're using that to spend down on capital over time. Solid waste fund of about $5.6 million, and then the stormwater fund, which is really closed down. That's why it has a zero balance. So there's no activity in that fund. The other non-major special revenue funds, these are the fire districts primarily. The grants fund, which is the general special revenue fund, the emergency telephone system fund, and so forth. And again, these are the fund balances where we will start the discussion during budget time with the fire districts, and looking at what fund balances then will be moved to those as part of next year's operating budget process. And we have the internal service funds. Those are where we account for services provided within the county to other funds. For instance, tonight on your agenda, you appropriated some of those funds for the internal service fund for IT. And the point being that over time, on an appreciated basis, we build up some savings into those funds to be able to fund one-off or one-time projects that come up, keeping those rates level again to the departments without having spikes or having to pass that back directly to the department. You see the health benefits fund, the workers' comp fund. Those, of course, the health benefits fund funds our self-insured program, our self-insured health benefits program. So that helps provide that funding throughout the year. And there's different ways to approach that. And then, of course, property casualty fund, those are all insurances. And then IT, facilities, and fleet are for providing those services within the county and are charged back to the specific using departments. So with that, I know I went kind of quickly through them. We'll delve a lot deeper into these different pieces, I think, during the budget process. But I wanted to kind of give you the initial, this is where we start now, close down the 17 and start into the 19 process, because it's about that time. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
Commissioner Rushing.
Do we know this year how many million a penny generates?
Which year? 2017, 2018?
Yeah, how much does a penny
It's
generate?
about $2.4 million this year in 2018.
Okay. And we had, so basically 7.9 million in revenue and money that was in growth revenue and then in what we saved, right?
That's the difference between revenue and expenditures.
Right. That's good news.
It is good news. Just keep in mind that once we went through and made the audit adjustments and accounted for your reserve policy and those other things, the unassigned or appropriable piece of that was about $1 million, not the full 7.8. So that kept up with some of your other liabilities. As we mentioned, there's OPEB liabilities. There's some other restricted issues. So really, the measure for the board or appropriable fund balance is that 900 or that 977,000 on the unassigned line.
Commissioner Simpson.
If I understand this correctly, as we went through the budget process last year, you were expecting to pull roughly $5.6 million out of the fund balance to cover the budget for the 17 budget, correct?
That'd be about right, yes.
And instead, we pulled nothing out and actually added another $1 million on top of that.
That'd be correct.
So my expectation, as just a comment, as we go through this budget process, the way I view it is we collected roughly, over the 3 cents plus or minus, a little more than 3 cents in revenue and ad valorem taxes above what was forecasted. And that's been my concern as we go through here. When you look at the 9.7 plus the 5.6, look at $6.6 million above what you had built into the budget. So roughly 3 cents, 2.5 cents.
Commissioner Simpson, what I would say is when Mr. Yates presented these results to me, I think it gives us a foundation upon which to build from the standpoint of looking at our revenues, how we calculate some of our revenues, are we being too conservative in some cases, as well as our expenditures. Mr. Yates and I have talked about, for example, our economic development grants. Is there some other way we can fund those so we still have the funds available if they're pulled down without actually budgeting them? So I absolutely agree with, I think, where you're going, which is the fact that I think this gives us really good information to use as we build upon the 19 budget.
We're too conservative.
Well, I don't disagree with you, and I think that's, in looking at this variance analysis, I think that was kind of, in talking, as Cindy mentioned, and talking about this, is we can look at some of the ways we do those things that we don't have control over from an operational standpoint. So if you consider this table, if you look at it like we did everything perfectly and we hit 100% of our estimates in those other areas, then we would still be $6 million underspent through no control of our own. So I think as we go through that process, there's a lot of ways to look at how to do that.
And that would be my only comment. I think we're being too conservative, and the tax rate is not accurately reflecting the needs of the government to run. Instead, we're collecting significantly more each year than what we need, and I would ask that as we go through this budget process that it gets reviewed a little bit closer.
Any further questions, comments? Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. That will take us to item 29A, which is our item 23, is regarding our road naming.
Mr. Chairman, I have a bit of concern about some comments that were made tonight, and I guess I'm looking for clarification. So Bjorn, maybe you can help me with this. You mentioned that there were two families, one of them, of course, represented here tonight, that had a preference for the naming of this road, and that you went back to and correct me if I'm wrong, but you went back to a group of individuals, or was it a staff decision? How did we come up with Blessed Road, I guess is the...
That was based on a follow-up meeting we held in, I want to say, late October. We invited everyone who had submitted a name related to this section of road, and we said, invite whoever you want who can provide input into this process or cares about this. So we ended up with about 16 people attending that meeting. It was held in the community, and we went through the process, say here's where we are. We're intending to bring a name as required by general statute to the December 4th meeting. We had competing names. We could try and choose one of them. We could come up with a third option where it's some hybrid of the two names that was proposed, or we could come up with some third option. And so went by order. Rank order was leave us alone, can't be left alone. Have to rename the road. Can we name it East Pfeiffer? It's not eligible because it's offset due to the expressway shown in the map. Can we go with a third name? So we went with, just because some of them may not be eligible, went through the list of names that were recommended, and the only one that was an option was Blessed Road. And so that's what was proposed. We know it wasn't that satisfying an option, but at the staff level, we weren't going to choose between one proposed family name and another. So we're throwing it at you.
But the two affected families, in fact, at that point in time, had agreed to Blessed Road, was my understanding. Okay.
That is correct.
Okay, so the community actually voted on the name Blessed Road.
Yes, it was supported, but it was supported by, I think, everyone. Now, there may have been one person who didn't like it.
Okay. Thank you. That was my question.
Mr. Rushing?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The name Trawick Ivy Road was thrown out there, and nobody liked that.
They did not like the combination between the two families.
Any reason behind that? Any?
There is some reason that I'm not discussing.
So the that's kind of a tough one, because like I said, if you had, how many people at the meetings were half of them for, you said the one was Trawick Farm Road, to be
Yes.
clear,
Yes, sir.
right? And then the other was Ivy.
CJ Ivy.
Okay. But most people said Blessed was okay.
I'm sorry?
Most people said Blessed was okay.
Yes.
Mr. Helms?
Yeah. my
Just a moment, ma'am.
My question is, I think you explained that it divided your property, Trawick property, is that correct?
Yes.
It kind of divided that. What about the Ivy property? Or did they have property that were?
No, they were not, they're not affected.
Property in the area, family property in the area, but
Area,
to my
not-
knowledge,
not
they were
one
not-
that were
they did not
displaced.
have- They did not have condemned property from the expressway itself.
Any further? Would you like to hear from the young lady to
I would.
clarify anything?
Yes.
Would you like to come and speak?
The road went right through the middle of our 100-acre farm. And then, of course, this other road had to be built. And we were the only landowners that was affected whatsoever by changing through the bypass. So, you know, and my husband passed away in 2013. And they started the road 2 or 3 months later. But they bought our property in 2001. But we were the only landowners that were affected in that interchange. And all the rest of them on the road down from the bypass and Forest Hills Road down to Marshville, they were not affected whatsoever.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna make a recommendation that we change the name of that road to Trawick Farm Road. And with that, I'll offer a motion that with that amendment, we approve the roads as submitted.
Are there 18? Okay, we have a motion. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, is your motion to adopt the ordinances as modified?
Correct.
That would be correct with that one modification. Any discussion? I would just say that this is something near and dear to my heart. Work with groups in Georgia. One of the biggest detriments to farmland preservation is an expressway or a road going through the center of a farm and splitting it in two. You can't ever put it back together. And so I wholeheartedly support this motion. So all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. And that takes us to item 29B.
Yes, Commissioners, as I indicated earlier this evening, the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services temporarily assumed leadership of Cardinal Innovations, and they have looked to the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners regarding how to put forward a new board over that organization, and have requested from the 20 counties that are within that catchment area to each nominate a commissioner to serve on the nominating committee in selecting a new board.
Okay. Any questions for the manager regarding the issue at hand? Any nominations for that position? Commissioner Rushing.
I'd like to nominate Vice Chairman Helms.
Okay.
My thought was to nominate Commissioner Jerry Simpson because you served on that board, right?
Yes, I have, in fact, when it existed, yeah, early on. Okay, we have Commissioner Helms.
I've
Oh,
got, I've got my plate full right now. I would
right,
appreciate
would-
it if,
would
I got some bad information today. Does anybody want to do it?
this would
I'll tell you what, I'll do this if you'll take Carpo for me.
Oh, no. I don't live in Carbo, I live in Rumpo. We used to call it ours Rumpo, rural.
All right, would you accept a friendly amendment, Commissioner Rushing, to yield to Commissioner Helms for me to take the,
I'll drop my nomination.
Okay.
If he's busy, I'll drop my nomination.
okay, and I'll accept it, so.
Took one for the team.
Motion for me to sit on that committee. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you.
Sorry, Jerry.
That's okay. Takes us to commissioner comments. Or not, I'm sorry, county manager's comments. Getting ahead of myself.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. I just wanted to thank the board for your support this evening, and I look forward to continuing to serve this board, this organization, and this community. Thank you very much.
Vice Chairman Helms.
I just want to acknowledge, I appreciate very much, we had 4 Indian Trail councilmen plus their new town commissioner joined us tonight. They can be that many because they're ones that just got elected and they're getting involved. So I appreciate their time, and I think a Waxhaw commissioner was also here. And I appreciate the involvement and interest by our municipalities in working with us.
Commissioner Lance Simpson.
No comments.
Commissioner Rushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to you, Mr. Chairman, and to you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Once again, this board has been excellent to work with the past year, and next year we have an election. I may not be available for this again, so you know, Jerry, I've got great respect for you and Richard both, and look forward to working under your leadership for the next year.
Thank you. That chairmanship is very similar to the Marine Corps. You're never an ex-chairman, you're just a former chairman, so we'll yield to the former chairman and hear his comments.
Well, I just want to share my appreciation with this board and the staff that have worked with myself and Vice Chairman Helms over the last year. It has been an honor to serve this board as your chairman. I very much appreciate the trust that you placed in me in allowing me to serve as your chair, and look forward to serving Vice Chairman Helms and Chairman Simpson this year, and going forward and continuing the good works that we're doing here in Union County. With that, I wish everyone a good evening.
Thank you. And it is a late evening, but if you'll bear with me just a moment, I want to first thank my family, my granddaughter Faith, for participating in my swearing in. She's one of 8, and that's the joy of my life, is those grandkids. 2 of my sons were here, my baby Jordan, and then one of my twins, Justin. And I know that Major Simpson with the Marine Corps, who's in California currently, was with me in spirit, always semper fi. He's always faithful. And my beautiful wife, Sheila, of course, was here. That's sort of how I prioritize things. Faith family, and country. I want to thank this board. Stony Russian and I were talking, and we were having a philosophical discussion. And I told him that it was important to understand that we were all sinners, of whom I was chief. And the next thing I know, he had told somebody I wanted to be chief. And so that's how I ended up. That's how communication goes. You get mixed up sometimes. But I want to thank this board because all are inherently more qualified to sit in this chair than I. I firmly believe that. I'm the least qualified to be here. You know, the framers of our state constitution were brilliant people when they put this system together. The chairman has only a few distinct powers. It's the board and the sum of those opinions of that board that formulate policy, and that's a great system to work under. We don't do it individually, we all do it together. There's a special cog in that relationship between staff and administration and the Board of County Commissioners, and that's the clerk to the board. And I want to thank Lynn West for all the hard work she does. I told her today she's the tip of the spear when it comes to keeping us all straight and dealing with the issues that we do. Philosophically, I'm for limited government. I've said it many times that he who governs least governs best. And I firmly believe that, and we'll work in that direction. The best government is self-government, personal responsibility, self-determination, and among those, the greatest of all, property rights. That said, there are those who, due to circumstances, have needs that bring us all a responsibility to offer a hand up when we can. I was thinking about this opportunity today, and it reminded me of my grandfather. You know, that Jerry B. Simpson, that B stands for Bennett, and my grandfather's name was James Orr Bennett, and he got named Bennett because a superior judge here in Union County was named Bennett. He was named after one of those superior court judges here in the Union County. But my grandfather had a team of a horse and a mule, and the horse was called Maud and the mule was called Bill. And I can remember the many times that I rode in that little old wooden sled, and we picked up firewood and leaf mold and all those things on the farm. And one time we were going up a sharp hill in a curve, and Maud, she was pulling her heart out, and old Bill was laying back in the traces and wasn't pulling. And my grandfather cut him across the rear end and said, "Come up, Bill, let's work together." So sometimes we're guilty, and I'll tell you that I've probably been guilty of laying back in the traces a little bit and not pulling equally, but I'll promise to try and do that as we go through the year. I share an abundance mentality. I believe that we grow the pie. There's not a limited number of pieces. We grow the pie so that everybody benefits. I think it's going to be a great year, and I look forward to many outstanding accomplishments. So with that, I'll move we adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.